Well, good morning and welcome to Copernicus. My name is Sarah and I'm so happy you're here today. For those of you who don't know, Copernicus is a Bible study. We meet on Sunday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for about an hour. So anytime you can catch us, whether it's live or on replay, we love to have you. We focus on two things here. One is to help you read and understand your Bible. The other is to introduce you to Jesus of the Bible. So anytime you can join us, we're thrilled you're here. Okay, y'all, last week we started a 4-week series on the book of Ecclesiastes. And I want to know, what did you think about it? We kind of started laying out the groundwork and all of that. And now we're going to drill a little deeper and see what we can learn. So I'm thrilled you're here. Let me know that you're here in the comments, and we're going to turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning. Welcome back to Copernicus. We are back in Ecclesiastes, hug and smoke. We are trying to find something solid to stand on in a world that's made of vapors. And so last week, we started in this curious book. It's very strange, but it makes us ask questions like, why? So we determined that either life has meaning or it doesn't. If it does have meaning, it should go a certain way, or at least it seems that seems right. And if it doesn't have any meaning, then does anything I do really matter? Alternatively, if there is no meaning inherent in the system, maybe I should be making meaning of my own. Maybe it's through work, pleasure, political maneuvering, social work, relationships, religion, whatever. Maybe that's where I find my meaning and purpose. And so we looked last week at three things: nature, wisdom, and pleasure. Nature showed us that we are vapors. Wisdom and pleasure turned out to be vapors themselves, as good as they were. Now, the very first verse of the book starts off this way. Actually, this is the second verse of the book. It says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And we learned that all of these things, nature, pleasure, wisdom, they all provided something that was substantial, but something that they also demonstrated something that was temporary and fleeting. And so they either they demonstrated that we are temporary and fleeting, or that the other thing that we're chasing is temporary and fleeting. And so it may be real, it may be desirable, but it's not something that can be chased down and held on to. And we learned this word, hevel. Hevel means vapor. And so it's the idea that something is real and substantive, but it can't be grasped. So either that means it can't be held in your hand, or it can't be understood once you get to it. And so if someone were able to grasp smoke, what would they have to show for it? Nothing, right? And smoke is real and substantive, but it's impossible to grab a hold of. And so this week, we're going to see where we ended up last week. We sort of teased out the idea that's popular in our world, is that the only thing we can live for is right now. You know, you got to live in the moment, got to be mindful of the present, and so that's how we find meaning in our world. So today, the teacher is going to explore this. Now, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to see it at first, because he doesn't approach it the way we would. It's because he doesn't live in the 21st century. So just kind of hang in there, and you'll see where it's going. It's Ecclesiastes 2, verse 12. Then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and also madness and folly. What more can the king's successor do than what he's already done? So he's not using, he's using wisdom, but the idea is not about using wisdom. It's about considering wisdom, madness, and folly. I'm gonna look at those and see how they work. Okay, and so he's done everything else he can do. This is like his last resort. It's not, but that's what he's thinking. So I saw that wisdom is obviously better than folly, just as light is better than darkness. Okay, that's exactly what you expect out of a Bible verse, right? Right, but keep reading. It says, the wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in darkness. But I came to realize the same fate overtakes them both. Now, what does this mean? So the teacher is sad about the fact that the wise man obviously is making better choices than the foolish man. But in the end, neither one fares any better. The wise man doesn't fare any better than the foolish man, right? So is wisdom really better than foolishness in the end? That's a troubling statement, right? Keep reading. Then I said to myself, well, the fate of the fool will overtake me also. That's death. He says, what do I do? What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, well, this is meaningless. Now, remember, this is hevel. Now, here he's saying, not that I can't grab a hold of it with my hands. I can't grab a hold of it with my mind. This is confusing. This is a conundrum. I don't understand why something better doesn't happen to the wise man than the foolish man. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. And for most of us, we would agree, like, oh, that doesn't make any sense, right? Here we go. For the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. We learned that last week. The days have already come when both have been forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. So neither one's going to be remembered in the end. Remember last week we talked about this generation can't remember the last generation, the next generation won't remember us, right? Remember all that? The same applies to those living now, and right now, it doesn't matter if they're foolish or wise, the day will come when neither one of them will be remembered. Okay? So no matter what they do right the moment, it's not going to last. It's a vapor, right? So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it's meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So the teacher went from enjoying the moments in life and being very successful to hating it. He had the life that most people wanted, but he despised it because it was fleeting and it wouldn't last and nobody would remember it. And nothing he did now or ever is going to mean much of anything. It's a puzzle that he couldn't solve. It was hevel. It's like, he's like, I'm trying to understand it, but no matter how close I get to, I can't grab a hold of it with my brain, right? Keep reading. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one that comes after me. Now, at first, this sounds really selfish. Don't you want to leave everything to your children? But watch how he's going with this. He says, and who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish? Yet they will have control over all the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun. So while I was alive under the sun on the planet, I did all this stuff. I'm going to pass this on. I could get everything right. I could do everything by wisdom. I could build a big house, have lots of money. I could train my children right. And then I'm going to pass all of what I've learned, all of what I've earned. I'm going to pass that on to a child who may not even really care. At the end, after dad dies, he's going to be like, hallelujah, he's gone. I can do whatever I want. And not have any respect or even remember what I've done. That's what he's saying here. Well, that's depressing. And that's what he says. He says, look, this too is hevel. It's hard to understand. It's an enigma that he couldn't figure out. And so he says, so my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. He did what any normal human being would do if you think like this. He got depressed, right? Now keep reading. Verse 21, he says, for a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all they own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is hevel and a great misfortune. He says, look, I'm thinking about this. The more I think about it, the more distressing this is, because I've done all this work. I'm going to leave it to a person who has not done all of this work, and who knows what he'll do with it, right? And it seems to the teacher a great failure in the system, and you may be thinking it's a great failure as well. Keep reading. What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days. Their work is grief and pain. Even at night, their minds do not rest. This too is hevel, right? Now, just think about this. He's like, the truth is, all of the success and wealth is a problem long before the person who has it dies. And here's why. Because even while they're alive, they're stressed about it. So just think about how silly this is to the teacher. He said, this is the puzzle. You're worrying about the thing you've been chasing that you can't catch. You see the problem? And then after you die, all the stuff you've been chasing, you're going to leave that to somebody else who doesn't really care or may not care. And that is hevel. That is a conundrum. It's a puzzle that he can't make sense out of. A person can do nothing better, he concludes, a person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? So here's what the teacher says. He says, look, at least I can enjoy the moments. You see this? See how he's come to this point? At least I'm going to eat, I'm going to drink, I'm going to enjoy what I've earned. I'm going to do the best I can with what I got. After all, God invented food and fun, right? That was his idea. And so I'm just going to do the best I can to enjoy that, to live in the moment. Sounds good, right? To the person who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth to hand it over to the one who pleases God. Now, this is a weird verse. It is. There's no way around it. At first glance, this seems like this is how it should be. And the teacher says this is how it should be. People who obey God, they should get. People who disobey God shouldn't. They should lose, right? The teacher thinks this is the way it should be. Now let me ask you a question before we read the next verse. Is this the way it is? No. No, it's not. I mean, it's just not. Okay? He says this too is hevel, a chasing after the... It doesn't always happen this way. This is the way it should be. It would be nice if my whole life was filled with these moments and these moments meant something, but they don't. They're chasing after the wind too. I keep looking for meaning in these little bitty tiny bits of moment, and there isn't any. I keep trying to figure out the puzzle, and I can't. And it's all going to go away. I'm going to be forgotten. And the single moments that I found meaning in, there's no meaning in them. They don't have any lasting value. God gives, God takes, and a person's life is not the sum of all his worth. So living in the moment for the teacher is like chasing the wind. You'll never catch what you're chasing. Well, that's terrible. So now the teacher's going to turn his attention to time. Okay? Now, so far everything the teacher has tried to catch has left him empty-handed in the end. Now the teacher's going to think about time. He's going to explore time, and maybe he can find something solid to grasp in time. Now, this chapter will sound extremely familiar to most of you. And here's why. You may not know who these people are, but you know this song, Turn, 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 right? You heard this. If you listen to an oldie station for my Gen X and Z friends, then you'll hear this every once in a while. This song comes right out of Ecclesiastes 3, which is what we're getting ready to read. There's also this book by John Grisham. It's also a movie, A Time to Kill. It's a great book, by the way. I really enjoyed it. Movie wasn't too bad either. Now that you have my assessment of these things, you can be happy, right? But these songs and this book, they come right out of Ecclesiastes chapter 3. So the best way to think through the book is to read the book. So let's jump right in and read chapter 3. Here we go. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens or on the earth, right? So now what the teacher's going to do, he's going to give us 14 sets of these polar opposite things that encompass pretty much everything that happens on the earth, okay? So you'll see how this works. It's really easy. And you don't, just try not to sing the song as we go, okay? Here we go. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build. I know you want to sing. I got it. Okay, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Okay, and then a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, which reminds us of COVID-19, right? Time to refrain from embracing. There you go. And then he keeps going. He says, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away. He needs to look at my refrigerator. A time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Everything has a time and a place. Humans work off of seasons and times. At certain times we harvest. At certain times we plant. At certain times, June in the United States is like the big month for marriages, right? Everybody wants a June wedding, right? I don't know why, but that's what they want. So it's a big deal. And so humans work off of these times and these seasons. And we get to places where we've been at war for a long time. We say it's time for peace, and we're willing to do things that we weren't willing to do for the purpose of peace. This is times and seasons. There's a time for everything. Things happen in cycles. Okay, so look at the next verse. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden that God has laid on the human race. So what do humans get for working the seasons and observing the times? Nothing they can hold on to. Because why? They're vapors, remember? And their activities are vapors. So this is hard. We don't like this, but look at the next verse. He says, He has made everything beautiful in His time, and He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. This is a beautiful verse, you just have to think about it. So first of all, God has set a time for all things to become beautiful, whatever they are. For me, you, for flowers, plants, trees, whatever it is. He sets the times. We can observe the times, we can work in and out of the times, but He sets the times. And why has He done this? Well, because another thing He's done, that's what He's done on the outside. What has He done on the inside of human hearts? These vaporous people. He set eternity in our hearts. This is so weird because I am a vapor and I want to understand things that aren't vaporous, right? I'm here for a minute, but I want to understand eternity. And so we long for it. God has made that in us. But no matter how hard we run, no matter how fast we travel, no matter how hard we try to understand what God has done, we can't. Any advantage that I might gain from my toil, from working hard and trying to understand, is nullified by the fact that God is bigger than I am. He's not vaporous, I am. And so this is hard, but this is the way it is. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift from God. Time and happiness and good things are a gift from God while humans live for the short time they do. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear Him. What humans do is temporary. No matter how much fun they have, no matter how hard they work, no matter what they accomplish, their accomplishments are temporary. What God does is forever. Human accomplishments are not like God's accomplishments. So God's eternal providence should cause humans to have a respect and a fear and a reverence for God because He knows more and He lasts longer than we do. He's more substantial than we are. Whatever has already been, whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before. And God will call the past into account. Now, this is an interesting verse because it gives us it's a single verse that kind of shows us how God exists. So, for God, what has been, whatever is right now, has already been for him. So it's in the past. What will be is also in the past. And God can call up the past to account. So that's not meaning that he is going to judge the past, but that's not what this means. It's that all times are present to God right now. He is present at all times right now. We call this the omnipresence of God. Okay, it's a big fancy word. So from God's viewpoint, time is already done. He's been, he is, has been, and is in every point in time. We live in a teeny tiny little spot on the timeline. God lives in all of them. He is always available. So, time is a bust because I'm this big, and time and God are bigger. And so, time does not, I'm not going to be able to chase it down and grab it. So what about me? What if time offers no answers? Perhaps I should look within myself. We should look within ourselves for meaning and purpose. What happens if I focus on myself, on my inside work, or whatever, for meaning? Well, that's a good question, and the teacher's going to explore that. So let's see what he says. And I saw something else under the sun. So on the earth, this is all on the earth. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there, and in the place of justice, wickedness was there. We've seen this before, right? The places where justice and right judgment should be happening, there are wicked people involved in this whole thing, and they're not doing the right thing. And then he's not talking about a place or a country. He's talking about every place under the sun, on the whole planet. This is not one people group versus another. This is all of them. He's like, this is what and that's what he says, because I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. So he's like, I know how time works, all right? I know how God works. So he's confident that God's going to do the right thing for both the righteous and the wicked. Every deed will be judged. No one will get away with anything. That's great news, right? Okay? So I said to myself, as for human, God tests them so they may see that they are like the animals. What? What is this? Humans are like animals? That's not, you don't see that in the Bible very often. What does he mean? Well, so God's going to test humans to show them that they are like animals. What does that mean? Here's what it means. Surely the fate of humans is like that of all animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. Okay, so first of all, humans and animals are not the same. Okay, we're clearly different. I have opposable thumbs. My dog doesn't, right? That's different. So from the writer's viewpoint, though, he is an Old Testament believer, an Old Testament writer. He believes that God created humans in the image of God, not animals, okay? But here's the thing. Animals and humans both do the same thing. They die. And this is what he says. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is hevel. So humans and animals breathe the same breath. So in this respect, breathing, living, and dying, humans have no real advantage over animals. I mean, opposable thumbs is nice. But the writer thinks that this is weird, that this is an enigma too. And why? Because he knows that humanity was created in God's image. Animals weren't. Why should their fates be the same? Why shouldn't animals and humans have different ways of living on the earth? He's not done. All go to the same place, all come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? He's like, look, I can see their body turn to dust, but I can't see what happens to their spirit. Does the animals go down and humans go up? Is that where the difference is? He doesn't know. From the outside, we don't know what happens to animals or humans after they die. We need somebody to tell us that, but it ain't going to be the dead ones. They're not telling us, right? Because they're dead, right? He says, so I saw that there's nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work because it's their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? So it seems that there's much we don't know about life after death, so we have little control over what happens while we're alive. So the best option is just make ourselves as comfortable as possible. I mean, that just makes sense. That's in the Bible. That's good news, right? Until you read the next verse. Again, I looked and I saw the oppression that was taking place under the sun. Again, this is not oppression in one country or to one people group. This is all the oppression that happens in all the world. This is how the world is. So he was going to just sit back, relax, make himself as comfortable as possible. Now he looks around and he's like, well, stink. I see oppression, and it's taking place all over the world. He said, I saw the tears of the oppressed, and that they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter, right? So you have the oppressed and the oppressor, and neither one of them have friends. This is terrible, right? He's not done. He says, and I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. He said, look, if you're dead, be happy about that, because you don't have to watch all this craziness, all this wickedness, all this oppression. You don't have to watch all. You don't have to watch all these friendless people doing what they do. They're not. The dead people are happier because they're not worried about this stuff. They don't have to view it anymore. And if you think that's good, better than both is the one who has never been born, who has never seen evil that is done under the sun. So the dead are happier. People who have never been born, they haven't made, because they haven't had to see any of this. They haven't had to deal with any. They don't have to make decisions or try to figure it out. Why is it unfair? They'll never have that question. And I saw that all the toil and all the achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. And so here's what you've got. You've got people who lord it over the people who have not, and then the people who have not envying those who have it. So you have, the top 1%, they're evil. And then you have the 99% who wish they were like the top 1%. You see how this works? It's like, it's a never-ending cycle. Both are continually trying to get what the other person has. They're both self-centered, and they're both miserable. And this is hard to understand. It is hevel. It is a puzzle. Why is it like this? You would think that the people on the bottom wouldn't want to be like the people on the top. You would think the people on the top wouldn't want what the people on the bottom have, because they already have enough. But that's not the way it works. It's a puzzle. And he's not done. He says, look, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Laziness can make you poor and hungry, but chasing after things so hard that will make you rich and everything, but give you no peace, isn't any better. The better for both parties is some peace, some tranquility, something they could grasp that would give them peace. And what the writer's saying is, like, look, living for yourself to get what you can get is chasing after the wind. It will never satisfy. He's not done. He says again, I saw something hevel under the sun. There was a man all alone, and he had neither son nor brother. So the teacher's going to expand on this concept. He says, look, you think that doing everything for yourself is working. Look at this guy. He has no brother, no son, nobody. It's just him. Okay? There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? And so what is this guy? He's working really hard, and he's not satisfied with where he's at. He wants some more. You know what he is? He's a workaholic. And who's he doing it for? Himself, right? He's depriving himself of relaxation and stuff because he wants more for him. This too is meaningless. It's a miserable business. Okay, why the guy works so hard? For what? For himself. It doesn't end up being fulfilling. He says, look, two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. He says, look, self is a thing that you can chase all your life. You'll never catch it. Other people deserve our attention, and community is good for everyone. He says this, if either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Do I need to explain that? Right? This makes sense, right? He says, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Again, this makes perfect sense, right? And he says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. This is the biblical version of the phrase, no man is an island, right? Self is a lonely, dead end. And the teacher's like, this is a waste of time trying to live for just me. He says this, better a poor but wise youth than an old but foolish king who no longer knows how to heed a warning. Now, he tells this story over the next 3 verses about a young man who comes from nowhere. He's not anybody important, but he ends up being the successor of this wise king, right? And so when he becomes the successor, all the people in the land are like, wow, this is a great story. He pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He became the king, right? And all the people are like, well, right? And they're cheering. But then in generations later, nobody looks back on that young man as a wise king. they don't see the story the same way. And so this is what he says about this, because this too is meaningless. It's hevel. It's a chasing after the wind. If all of this confusion happens, it happens all the time, and any time that you're looking out for only yourself, you're chasing something you can never, ever catch. Now, so far, the teacher has looked at nature, wisdom, pleasure, living for the now, time, and self. And all of these things are real and substantive, but none of them offer anything that can be caught by chasing it. They leave us all with hard questions and empty hands. So, the next thing the teacher's going to look at is religion. What about religion? Surely, if it's in the Bible, religion is going to have something to offer in the way of answers and meaning, right? Well, next week the teacher will lead us and to an exploration of religion to see if that brings us any meaning, any hope, something we can grasp. Think you know how it's going to turn out? You might be surprised. We'll find that out next week. So, how's the teacher making you feel? Is this depressing? It is a little depressing, isn't it? Or does it start, do you start to feel at least a little bit validated because you've been thinking some of this stuff all your life, and you say, the world is confusing. Life does feel like I'm chasing after the wind. Are you surprised that the Bible actually confirms and validates those feelings? This is the wisest man in the world, and he's saying the same thing that you and I are. We're not probably I'm not the wisest person. You might be, but I'm not the wisest person in the world. But I've thought this before. I'm like, why am I spinning my wheels, right? If you're surprised that the Bible confirms these kinds of feelings, you shouldn't be. That's why we read it, because God understands what we're going through. Now, if you're wondering how the teacher's going to conclude all of his ponderings, you definitely want to come back for the next 3 weeks. In the meantime, think about the why and start thinking about the who. Let me pray with you, okay? Oh, Father, we are grateful for your love and for this book and for helping us think through where we find meaning and hope and purpose. And as we read this book, soften our hearts, help us to think about not just the why, but who can satisfy our every longing. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.